Welcome everyone and good evening to those of you who are in the room and to those of you who are joining us online. My name is Colin Bailey and I'm the President and Principal here at Queen Mary. And it's great to welcome you to the Alumni Angles event where we showcase the amazing talent amongst our alumni community. But before I introduce tonight's event, let me just give you a quick update on where the university is. So currently, we've got 32,000 students at Queen Mary University London. We're up to 8 campuses in London. You're on one of our campuses, the Mile End campus. I won't take you through all the other 7, but we're up to 8 campuses. We've got over 170 nationalities on our campuses in London. And I say, where else can you meet so many different people from different backgrounds, different traditions, and different cultures? The university was named the first and #1 university in the UK for social mobility, where we open the doors of opportunity to anyone who has the talent, irrespective of their background, and to make sure we provide that opportunity to students from less privileged backgrounds, but more importantly, come into the community of Queen Mary and go on to those top career jobs in different sectors. And it's something that is within our DNA and something we're incredibly proud about. You would have seen that the UK every 7 years goes through an assessment of all the universities on the quality of their research. And we were ranked 7th in the UK for the quality of our research across the university, with leading areas in lifelong health, digital and AI, which we'll hear a bit about tonight, sustainability and energy, performance and culture, and accelerating innovation across everything we do. We were the first and still the only university to win the Platinum Award for public engagement. We were actually the first university to win the Gold Award for the Platinum for public engagement, the Gold Award for public engagement. But of course, a number of other universities won the Gold Award as well. So they decided to create a new award for Queen Mary, which was the Platinum Award. And we are the first and only university to win that award. Through our education, yeah, I think it's a round of applause, thank you. Through our education and research, we are a university that transforms lives, addresses inequalities, and makes new discoveries. Now let's return to the event tonight. There's nothing more powerful than our alumni coming back and telling us all about their amazing success. There's nothing more powerful to our students. If you can imagine an 18-year-old student coming through our doors, and obviously for the first time being at university, but hearing the stories about the people that were there before them, seeing the path that they trod, seeing the way that they have pushed on with success in their career. And I would urge all alumni that are here in the room tonight and those online to please keep telling us your stories. It is so powerful to our students to see the success that you have achieved and to see that actually they can achieve that. They can achieve that through a Queen Mary education. So please keep on telling us your stories. And of course, we're going to hear from an amazing alumni tonight, Dara Nasr, and about his amazing journey and story. But before we listen to Dara, can I introduce the chair for tonight, which is Professor Yasmin Ibrahim. Yasmin is a professor of digital economy and culture and Head of Department of Marketing. Yasmin's latest book draws on research from computer science to sociology and critical race studies to analyse how digital platforms can shape social attitudes and behaviour. And we're very grateful that Yasmin has agreed to chair tonight's event. So please give a warm welcome to Yasmin.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Colin. Rumour has it, Dara, that there are a number of high-profile cyber recruiters and tech recruiters today amidst in our audience. Ladies and gentlemen, alumni and students, thank you for joining us today for this alumni event. This particular event is really an exciting moment for me, precisely because there's a resonance that I share today with Dara's work. If Dara has been doing the front line of social media and platformization, my own work is on the digital economy. Part of human consciousness today, the ways in which we transact, do business, create networks, create connections, go into detox because we've been saturated by social media. The fatigue, the euphoria, the happiness, the ways in which we transact our lives, public and private, comes to bear. Lord Tennyson talks about the little birdie. Perhaps the little blue bird has got a resonance today in terms of what we're going to talk about. But we are not going to restrict our responses to 140 characters, Dara. You'll be pleased. Before I take you through to Dara's amazing trajectory since he left Queen Mary in 1996 with a shiny LLB degree, I just want to take you through today's proceedings. After this introduction, we're going to have 40 minutes of conversation with Dara. Thank you for all the questions that you sent to us. We've compiled them. We've created a list. We're going to ask Dara. And after that, we're going to open up the floor to live questions. This is your opportunity to find out, Dara, what are you going to do next? You're going to find out. And then I'm going to hand the podium back to Colin to close up the event, and we're going to head out for drinks, and we're going to have a chat and to catch up with many of you. Now, coming back to Dara. I read quite a lot on Dara. I thought I should know him before I came and presented him to you. He just told me he's got 2 dogs, Dave and a new addition called Frank. He's got 2 daughters, and he likes box sets. I also heard a rumor that he likes to review films. Might be a rumor, we'll find out. So what did Dara do when he got his law degree in 1996? He went on to do his LPC in 1998, and then got a further business degree with the London Business School. And what does he do after that? He goes on to have quite an illustrious career, his last job as the former MD of Twitter. Joins them in 2012. Prior to that, he's the head of YouTube. You could see the social media connection coming through. But he's got an amazing trajectory. Eurosports, head of the IDS group. But one of the things that really impressed me was how he steered his group of people. He started out small with Twitter, about 20-something people. And I remember in one of his interviews he says, there were more rats or mice than toilets when they started in that office. Steering through COVID, he put the emphasis on mental health. Ironic in some ways, because if you think about social media, you think about the enormous kinds of pressure we face, but he kept an even keel. He wanted to look after his team. Mental health was a standout for him. Very commendable indeed. But beyond that, his work as a mentor for Media for All and Media Trust in empowering minority voices was one of his biggest passions throughout. He wanted to ensure that different ethnic populations were represented in the media landscape. So without further ado, let's put the spotlight on Dara today. Thank you, Dara, for joining us.
Hello, everyone. That's very well researched. I forgot I did half that stuff.
You see, we do stuff here like that,
Yeah.
so that you're going to be on the spotlight today. Tell us, Dara, what did you do when you left us? 1996 LLB. What led you to this point, I suppose?
Yeah, very little initially. I think that I really, I think, Professor, you mentioned social mobility. I've been very lucky in my life. And when my first day, I remember at Queen Mary when I came here. I grew up basically in northwest London in a nice area. My first day at Queen Mary, I came here, I realised that the people who had turned up, the first person in their family had been to university, they'd worked incredibly hard. They went to a school where the majority of people leave after GCSEs. And look, I must sound so kind of, out of touch, but I remember it was a real realisation for me. And then I just realised that whilst I came to study law, I didn't want to become a lawyer.
Yeah, that's one of the questions.
And I think I was kind of caught up with the kind of, what you see about law on TV, What you're going to realise, by the way, is after that amazing intro, is that I'm in fact an imposter and pretty much an idiot. Okay, so I wanted to go into law because I thought it was like TV. I then just realised it was extreme contract analysis, in my opinion. Right? And whilst we were in the library, my mates studying English were in the pub. And whilst I really enjoyed the subject and found it very stimulating, I realised I didn't want to be a lawyer. And certainly not as much as the people who really worked, incredibly hard, as I say, the people I met on that first day. So when I left, I didn't know what I wanted to be or do. And I was explaining before, I was very lucky in my upbringing that my mother was the major breadwinner in our house. We left Iran. I was born in Iran, child of the revolution, whatever. But I left in 1980. And we left. We didn't flee. We left because my mother got offered a senior job within British Airways. And she was the youngest ever general manager for British Airways at the time and the first ever woman general manager. And so she was very driven. She had to be. Whereas my dad was very laid back and kind of haphazard. And I'm somewhere in the middle. And I think that, so when I left university, I remember when I was young, my mum would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to be a doctor, right? Blah, blah. I went, nah, football, maybe football player. And I was rubbish at football, but I was better at football than I was science, probably. So, but I didn't, and she'd be so devastated, whereas my dad was like, he's 5, leave him alone, And she would say stuff like, again, when I was 5 or 6, the impact the Ayatollah Khomeini has had on Iran, blah, blah, blah. And I'd say, who's that? And she'd be, how come we don't know who he is? Like Barnaby down the road does. And I'm like, Mum, I guarantee he doesn't. And so she was very driven. Mm-hmm. But, I paint this picture, she's just wonderfully loving woman, very driven, and my dad was very laid back. So when I left, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Yeah. And my mum was really worried about that. She's like, well, why don't you know? I don't know. And, so I went in and I worked for a building society in HR, where I realised there can't be a God, because I worked in HR. No, I'm joking. But my point is, it was. So I did that, and I didn't. But my mum at the time, she'd moved and she'd become a very senior headhunter, and she said, look, having a postgraduate would be a good idea. And due to the wonderful establishment that Queen Mary is, was Queen Mary in Westfield when I was here, we would get into the College of Law. We didn't have to go through an strenuous kind of entry process. So I went and did, and she said it would be better to do that than a legal master's vocationally. So that's what I did. And then I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then a friends of mine from school and a couple here said, oh, we're in marketing, advertising, media, you'd love it. And I did.
So you were open to opportunities at that
I was kind of applying to, banks and stuff. And Mum said, oh, well, do you want to work there? I went, no. Yeah. Not really. Well, why are you applying? I went,
so
make good money, don't they?
How did you retain this creativity all along? I mean, you're the only child, you told me when we were speaking. And authenticity.
Why do you think I'm creative?
Well, people thought that you are. And so, they wanted to know about how you kept your creativity and authenticity.
Okay. Well, I think I think everyone is creative, actually. I genuinely think everyone's creative. And the reason I said, why do you think I'm creative, is at school, I'm not supposed to swear, am I? I won't swear. Oh, come on.
You'll ask Gemma.
Come on. No, I won't swear. Oh, is this live streamed and all this? I won't swear. I don't even know what swear words are. I did that for effect. Now, so, listen, I've been at Twitter 10 years. I know what swearing is. So I think at school, when you think creative, you think artistic or musical. And I wasn't. I wish I was. I love music. I wish I was. And I loved art. So I never saw myself as creative. But actually, I think everyone is creative in their own way. Mm-hmm. And I think creativity really comes from confidence, in my opinion. If you have confidence in your own ability. Mm-hmm. And I think also being aware that you don't have to be amazing at everything. Just surround yourself with people who are good at the stuff you're not good at, I think.
It's a good idea.
And I think that... So authenticity, though, I think... I was very lucky in my career. My mum would say that I made good choices, and I think there's a bit of both. But when I got my first job at IDS, which you mentioned was Flextech Television, as was, I went for 2 different interviews. One with a company called, IDS Flextech, and one called Carlton Television, which is now ITV. It was the London, for those of you not younger, it was the ITV, the London version of ITV. And everyone had heard of Carlton, and no one had heard of this other company. Mm. And I went for both the interviews, and I was lucky enough to be offered both jobs. Mm-hmm. Pretty much the contract, everything was identical. Mm. And my mum said, amazing, you're going to be working at ITV. I went, no, I'm going to work the other place. And she said, why? And I said, everyone who interviewed me just seemed really happy. And walking around the office, you could see, whereas everyone at ITV looked like they'd just been told really bad news. And maybe that I was interviewing. But and she just kind of like rolled her eyes at me. Oh, here we go again. What she didn't know, because even I knew it was a stupid thing, in the interviews, I asked both companies whether I'd get my own email address, as if it was a negotiation tool. Right, I told you I'm an idiot. Right, so and IDS were, yeah, of course you would. And ITV were, yeah, but no, genuinely it was the happiness. Everyone just seemed so happy.
Right.
And she rolled her eyes. And my mum now says, oh my God, what an amazing thing. And that was the kind of more authentic thing. I've always thought, if I have to spend 70% of my week working for 70% of my life, I just want to have a bit of fun. Or I want, you know, and that company was incredible. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was just incredible.
What advice would you give your 25-year-old self if you could go back in time?
While I was here?
Having done the trajectory you've done.
Kind of a bit of... I had a very kind of, I'd say, high-achieving mother, and her family are incredibly intelligent, and they always came like top of this, that, and the other. And meanwhile, I think because I was an only child, I went to school and it was like having fun, and I didn't really want to work that hard, and didn't want to do, you know. And by the way, this is not my advice. Don't work hard. I'm not saying that. Right, let's be clear. But I always felt a bit like that I've let them down a little bit, even though. And actually, the truth of the matter is kind of what I just said. You look around and you think, I wish I could be more like that person. I wish I could do this. Actually, forget that. Just be the best version of you, right?
That's good advice.
And genuinely, like, you know, you're going to be better at so many things than I am. But I'm telling you, sadly for you, I'm going to be better at other things. It's just a fact of life. And, you know, I know people who've been in work who've always felt threatened. So they hire people below them who they know are worse. You're just setting yourself up for failure. I hire people. The people I had below me, my team, I well up if I think about them. They're like heroes to me. So I think if you're just confident in your own ability, but also, look, you have to be, I say, I've been very lucky. You know, they say 50% of your happiness at work is dependent on who manages you. You know, I've had some amazing bosses, and I've had some appalling ones. But the amazing ones showed me how appalling they were. And you know, I think that I've had, you know, those amazing bosses have championed me, you know.
We've got a couple of advice questions. How would you move into senior leadership roles within a digital tech company?
I think, I don't know if it's changing now, but tech companies are really bad at grad level roles, in my opinion. And we were always talking, I've always been, you know, we were trying to do stuff at Twitter. You know, you mentioned the mentoring, we're trying to get people in. You know, so for example, the Google trend was, you know, you needed to go to a certain university with a certain degree and, you know, have X amount of experience. Yeah, fine, but they don't. Not a lot of people have that. And you know, Twitter was, albeit different, they didn't have the resource of Google, so we just didn't have a lot of roles. So it's really difficult. Everyone who joined, you know, you could have a superstar with 3 or 4 years experience, and they join, and they're the lowest of the low. Yeah. In terms of, if you look at, obviously, you know, I'm not talking about scum. I'm saying, you know, they're like hierarchically. And it's something I actually think it's more of a question for tech companies. What are they doing about it? Like in banking, you know, as I said, you get grad jobs. They don't really have that many grad jobs. I mean, I say it might be changing now, but they don't. They tend to get you in marketing or, you know, engineering. You don't start, you know, you have to be proven a little bit.
Right.
And actually my advice, so therefore, but if you really want to join one, depending on what you want to do, you know, if you want to work on the engineering side, be very good at coding and be willing to show that. If you want to work in anything but, just get good grounding elsewhere.
Right.
Or a bit of experience under your belt. Just be in constant communication. And I think just try to be, again, authentic and a bit original.
Okay.
You know, they get a lot of applications and you have to stand out. And I know it's difficult. And by the way, that's another reason, you know, law was intimidating, is that we always used to hear 2,000 people graduate from law a year and 20,000 people graduate and 2,000 jobs. Now, you don't have to be a master mathematician to work out the odds.
Right.
You know, so again, with tech companies that, you know, like this, everyone thinks tech companies like the land of milk and honey. But it's kind of, you know, they're tough to get into. And I was lucky. And by the way, the reason I got in is because I had the experience. I didn't, you know, I came from elsewhere, and then you know someone, they refer you. That's another thing as well, actually.
Networking?
Referral, yeah. Or having clever friends, you know, like, so if they work at, and actually that's another thing we're trying to move away from while I was there, because their main, when you're in a high recruitment drive, rather than employ loads of headhunters, actually if you've got staff, you just say, well, if you bring someone in, we'll give you a couple of £1,000s, right? And actually the staff are motivated because they're getting the money, but also they're not going to bring in an idiot because it's their credibility, right? So, but similarly, think about the effect of D&I on that. It's awful, because guess what? You bring in people who sound like you, look like you, grew up from where you're from, which is fine, but it's not great for a diverse mix of talent.
Which leads me to the next question. What is the key to developing a successful team?
Absolutely no idea. Oh, right, okay. Say that again? What's the key? What's the key to, okay, look, I think, when I joined Twitter, you mentioned, like, so just to give the numbers, I was like employee number 20 in the UK.
Okay.
There were 20 of us in the UK. And then I said, when I left, someone else who we might touch upon made quite a dramatic change. But just before I left, it grew to 450 in the UK. And one of the key things is when I joined, I looked around and everyone had been employed from Google, myself, Microsoft, or Yahoo, pretty much. And I said, right, we've got to stop recruiting from there, which is pretty hypocritical, because that's where I came from, right? But having again, and when you talk about diversity, you think, obviously, gender, ethnicity, age, mental, you know, all the ability, all these things, absolutely. But background as well, in terms of work background. And what was amazing for that is we were just learning all the time. And what I realized really early at Twitter, when I was at Google, and I have an ex-colleague here, Tim, who's ex-Google, and he's gone through it as well, is that Google just had loads and loads of people, right? So you like worked, and you know, if you went on holiday, no one would notice, you know, someone else would do it, or whatever. When I started at Twitter, I was doing stuff I had no right doing. You know, I was having policy meetings, you know, like, oh, what do you think of this? I don't know, I've never heard of it. But, you know, I'll give you, you know. And it's kind of, so what we realised quite early is we didn't have the time to not that I wanted to micromanage. Micromanaging is, I think, the absolute worst thing ever, but you don't have time. So every person in my team, like if you run a book of business, for example, you're considered the CEO of that book. And we kind of went down this kind of trust but verify rule, you know, so just like checking on them, but don't, you know, get your foot off their throat kind of thing, you know. And I think that having a broad group of people and bringing in different skills, it made recruiting more difficult, but if you're going, and again, look, I promise you, for me, a lot of it was surrounding yourself with people, yes, who are brilliant, but also smile. They like fun.
Happy people.
They're happy people.
We want to talk about failure. I mean, were there moments where you felt, you know, I've really failed and how am I going to pick up again?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of, I mentioned that first company, and what was incredible about them and the culture. And the problem with the word culture is if you ask 10 people to define culture, you'll get 11 different answers. You know, it's really difficult. And I think that, but the culture at that company was, look, we'll win together and we'll lose together. We'll just be open and honest, you know, about it. And I think that, I remember when I was at Twitter, someone said, I took this person out, I had a meeting with this guy at this ad agency, and they said, oh, they love working with us because we do this, this, and this, and they wish that another company would do this, this, and this. And he sent it to all the senior manager, and I wrote back going, if he'd had the meeting with you and told you that we were appalling, you would never have sent me that. And actually that's more useful to me. If you're not afraid of failing, but you're just learning, I mean, if you're trying to fail on purpose, you're a moron, right? But if you're kind of, you know, so we've had a lot of, you know, when I was at Twitter, we had a lot of ups and downs. But you really felt valued, you know, and I think that what I've learned is about it. There's nothing wrong with failing. I think about it, and I think for anyone in the room who's got kids, you know, if you go into a room and there's kind of, you know, like drawing on the wall, And then you go up to your kid, and that kid's holding a big pen, which matches the colour of the drawing on the wall. And that kid has the pen drawing on their face and all over their kind of body. And he said, and they just go, it wasn't me. You're like, well, you get more angry, but if they go, I'm really sorry, but it's very hard to stay angry with someone. And I kind of see it that way. And I think with failing, you know, I felt like, you know, as I say, I made a lot of choices that would have sounded like failing. And I think my mum always tells a story about me that when I was a kid, I was at this school and there's 17 people in this class and we had this exam and they put the list up of the results and I was 16th out of 17 and my mum was never out of the top 2, right? And she just went, how did you feel when you were 16th? And I went, thank God I wasn't 17. I said. And she said she was simultaneously so ashamed and so proud of me that she couldn't really say much. But I think, look, if you know where you're going wrong, you know where you're trying. And actually, that's what the thing I'm proudest of with my children is I try not to put a lot of pressure on them. But they'll come back and they'll go, oh, I got this in my exam. I know where I went wrong. And I'll go, well, you're going to work on that then, right? And they go, yeah. So failing's cool. Not learning's not cool.
Let's ramp things up a little bit. What next, Dara?
God knows. I mean, you said about me being front line. I've really felt, I'll tell you something, and please feel free to ask me what you want about Elon or whatever. Anything.
Those are coming.
I know. But I think, I can't tell you how lucky I've been. It was such a privilege to me, that job. But you don't realise till you stop how tired you are. You know, someone asked me at an event, a mentoring event, and it's a very common question, but they'd asked it, what keeps you up at night? And I don't mean health or, you know, work-wise. And I had an answer, and I went, I'm one tweet away from disaster. And I went home that night going, and I used this word, you know, deliberately. I went home thinking, shit, I literally am one tweet away from disaster. And that's actually, it's quite draining, I think. So what next? You know what? I don't know. I think...
you haven't signed on the dotted line yet, then?
What, somewhere else? No, I've just literally just coming out my notice period.
Okay.
What I would learn in my
law,
learn in my law, that would be contractually not right. So I've done that. So,
okay.
So I've learnt, you know, so I've been listening. But my point is, I don't know, but what I know is I love building stuff. And by stuff, I don't mean products. I'm not clever enough. I mean teams and ethos. I like working, interfacing. And if I never work anywhere, if I never have as much satisfaction as I've had in the last 10 years, I've still won. Because it's just been fantastic for me.
What was the line again? One tweet away from?
Disaster.
That's amazing. Does Twitter have a future?
Yeah, very good question. I know someone you can ask. Yeah, look, I think it's an incredibly powerful tool. I think, yeah, I do. I do think it has a future. But I think it is very dangerous to think, because you're very good at something, that you're very good at everything. And read into that what you will. But you can't just... Let's say, for example, I was brilliant at making cars. Right? Let's say. I wouldn't assume I was a brilliant surgeon on the back of it. And let's say, for example, I built, I don't know, different example, space rockets. I wouldn't necessarily think I'm a great artist. And I'm not saying you can't buy people who are, but yeah, whilst I don't think it's going to go away, but I don't think it's going to be the same necessarily, and that might not be a bad thing.
Right. What is your take on hate speech online?
Oh, I love it. I'm all over it. No, it's hurt. Like it's I mean, honestly, please, I hope this is obviously off the record, right? That's a joke, right? What's my take? It's like awful. I mean, let's make something abundantly clear. When I worked at Twitter, I didn't stay 10 years because I was exceptionally well paid. I stayed 10 years because the people I work with, both above, beside and below me, really cared. And every time a tweet, which it would like that, it would break our heart. And I'll give you an example because football's probably the most public. In 2018, right, any tweet that got removed for racism or any form of harassment was done so because a user had seen it and reported it. Okay, so 100% of the tweets that were taken down were seen by someone who thought this might go against terms and conditions. Went through a system which didn't take a long time, let's say a minute, to say this is why, there you go, submit. Mm-hmm. They then get an email saying we're looking at it, and then they get an email saying it has or it hasn't violated, right? That's in 2018. Mm-hmm. In 2022, in the racist field, 97% of the tweets that violated our terms were picked up automatically. And weren't seen. So, because that's the key thing, is someone has to see something horrific, or that they think is horrific, and I'll come on to that in a second, the nuance there, but then our systems are doing it. So hate speech is horrific. I hated it. But the work we did on it was very good. The problem is, one tweet that isn't caught by the system is one tweet too many. And there are some sick people out there, and they just want to game the system. When Elon Musk announced a load of layoffs, so what used to happen was when people would search for who runs Twitter in the UK, they would get my name. Funnily enough, it's not difficult to guess my email address. It was dara@twitter.com. You can try emailing it now if you want to see what happens. But, so they would get through to me and they go, I've been suspended for no reason whatsoever, or whatever. Every single person who did that, I would forward it to the support team. 95 times out of 100, I won't go as high as 99, but it's more than 90. The support team were right. Sometimes they were wrong. At the beginning, I would reply to each person. And everyone on my legal team, you're an idiot. What are you doing, right? But I come from a commercial background where I think customer service is really important. So I'd reply to people and say, I'm sorry, but, or I'm sorry, but this has been upheld. Or I would say, we're really sorry, but this was a mistake. You're back online. 99% of the people I replied to were thankful that I just got back to them. They went, okay, we get it, cheers. Or they might be, I'm saying that, thank you so much for replying. I stopped doing that when I started getting death threats, okay, but that's fine. But then forget that. When the layoffs happened, I got more than one email from people that I hadn't even replied to going, I hope you got sacked today, you effing C. Right? So these are the people we're contending with, right? If you want to look at social media and say there are a lot of problems, there bloody well is. And we have social media, I say we, I'm not part of it anymore, thank God. We have to make a lot of kind of effort to make it become better. But you hold a mirror up to society, I'm telling you, it ain't pretty. Yeah, so, yeah, I hate it. I absolutely do. But it is a problem, and it is a massive problem in society.
From hate speech.
Yes.
To
what's my favourite colour?
To disinformation.
Oh, yes, yeah, another hot
to
topic, yeah.
bleach-drinking presidents
Yeah.
who get banned from the platform. Mm-hmm. What's your take on it?
Yeah, Look, I think trolling has become, look, there's a few things, right? So trolling has become like a sport. So, and what I mean by that is trolling can have many forms. Trolling can be just horrific, i.e. to cause harm. Trolling can be very kind of, and I use this word advisedly, political, and we'll come on to that in a second. Or trolling can just be fun, you know, just like having a laugh with your mates, which would be referred to, you know, I don't like the term as banter or whatever, right? But, and kids love it, so my daughters troll one another all the time. When I, you know, and I like trolling them, they like trolling me. But my point is that when it goes to those other two levels of, so disinformation is an element of it. But it's, the one thing I'd say is I've learned, it's really bad, and I think that in 2016, again, technologies were built to compromise systems, which those systems didn't know about. But what I will say is, when you talk about disinformation, you know, like, the amount of rubbish I see journalists come out with. Right, and I'm not joking, you know, like, in my latter days at Twitter, so when Elon Musk acquired the company on the 24th of October, one publication in the US, which, by the way, is a very esteemed, well-known publication, in 1 week said he was going to make 75% of people redundant, 20% of people redundant, 25% of people redundant, 45% of people redundant, and 60% of people redundant. Neither of those were right. And they're always, we know. That is disinformation as well, right? Because, by the way, I'm getting calls going, oh, you... And we were fighting those battles. However, more serious stuff is when rubbish is put out to sway an election, to sway stuff like that. And when you said what's going to happen to Twitter, this is probably the single biggest concern that I would have. The harassment piece, whilst there's a lot of AI that is working on that, and even Musk has come out and said, we're going to suppress a lot of that. And, you know, some people are saying they're seeing it, but some people are saying there's more of it, so maybe I don't know. I don't know the answer. And I'll come on to that in a second as well. But on the political piece, the reason I'm worried about that is at the beginning, in 2016, people really stood up and they cared about it. A week after Musk acquires the company, less than a week, he tweets out an article saying that, is it true that Nancy Pelosi's husband was, you know, I'm thinking, oh God, why would you want to get involved anyway? And it's very dangerous. The story that you were referring to is, if you cast your mind back to 2020, Donald Trump, there was a meme or a video that came out of Donald Trump, and he's speaking to a bunch of people, not loads because it was COVID, but it was broadcast to America, if not the world. And he said, apparently, if you drink bleach, you won't get COVID. This is, by the way, when people, like, if people get COVID now, they're like, I've got COVID, I'll stay at home. Then it's like, you might die. That was, I remember, you know. And he said, drink bleach. And this is the president of what they would refer to as the free world, right? Saying that. If you look at behind him, is the Surgeon General, who's like going, if I say anything, I might be executed, basically, or like certainly sacked. This was a time when everyone was getting sacked every day, if you remember. They said that. That weekend, that was, I think, Thursday or Friday, that weekend, Twitter in the US got contacted by Procter & Gamble, who said, please, can we remove anything, like videos of it and stuff? And we're like, we can't, it's direct from TV. And again, this is confidential, but they were selling out of bleach in the Deep South. So when you have the president and then you've got the current CEO or the chief twit, as he's referred to, saying, oh, maybe Pelosi's thing's rubbish, her 83-year-old husband might not have been attacked, or whatever it was, robbed. And then you've got the president saying, drink bleach, or the ex-president. That doesn't really encourage people not to do disinformation, does it? And then you have what is referred to as Russian bot farms doing coordinated disinformation. So it's a problem. It was a problem before, and I suspect it will be more of a problem moving forward.
Is there a solution?
And, well, no. I mean, there's not a direct solution, but, you know, like, I suppose one could argue this has been going on since the dawns of time. History's told by the winners, or whatever they say, you know. History's written by the winners. You know, you hear various different things like that. But the thing I worry about there is the amount of influence certain people have that actually they didn't have that microphone before. And by the way, that doesn't just mean disinformation. It means when I was growing up, if you were supremely talented, you know, in a kind of entertaining way, you would end up on TV, right? Now any old idiot can do it. Like, you know, like, well, I say any old idiot. You have your moment in the sun on YouTube, TikTok, whatever, and suddenly you're like making 3 million quid a month or whatever it is, you know, and so the kids are like, well, I want to be all wearing like Burberry, Balenciaga, well, maybe not Balenciaga now, but various other kind of brands, and because I know I can make the money because Logan Paul did it, or KSI sells Prime, and I've got nothing against those two, by the way, but then that's what you're aspiring to be. And I think that a lot of the people they listen to and watch, especially in the States, I mean, Andrew Tate. Oh, sorry, I'm going to go down this rabbit hole, aren't I? So, you know, it's quite extreme. And, you know, that's tough. You know, the TikTok is funny. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you an anecdote about TikTok. A friend of mine started working at TikTok. People on TikTok here? Do anyone remember TikTok? I'll do this. You like this? Remember at the beginning of TikTok when you do stuff and you basically just do that, right? You remember all that, right? You remember. It's kind of moved away a bit. Charli D'Amelio was big. She was the first big. You don't have to get embarrassed. I've done the dance, right? You don't have to be embarrassed. But, like, literally, Charli D'Amelio was this kind of girl next door. She had 0 followers. But in 1 year, she got to 93 million followers. And by the way, she comes across as a lovely, like, normal girl next door. She's just a very good dancer. Mm-hmm. So she basically, my daughter at the time was 13. You're not allowed to be up before 13. She was 13. And she loved Charli D'Amelio. And honestly, she'd walk around the house doing these things. And I'd be like, anyway, so I spoke to my friend down at TikTok. And I said, and she said, she went, this nightclub said, they're doing a lot of stuff on TikTok. She went one evening, but everyone looked really weird. They'd stopped using their legs to dance. Because of the TikTok craze, and I can do it again if you want, you know, but I'll charge a fee for the dancing. But, you know, it's like they're just moving their upper body. So these fads and crazes, like they kind of move on. But anyway, back to disinformation. I don't think you asked me about TikTok dancing. But my point is that the influencers, it's become a huge, huge thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that we'll see a fallout. And I think what I'm worried about is they'll look up to the likes of Andrew Tate and various other people. And by the way, I've got no problem with any of these people. My point is there are a lot of impressionable, you know, kids. Sure. And they're like, you know, I've got close friends of ours, they've got a boy, he's just gone to university, and he's contacted me going, you know, why is Andrew Tate being kicked off? And I'm like, he's scum. Like, he's contravened every term of service. That's why. Oh, why? Change the terms of service. Why? No, but do you know what? The impression, it is frightening. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe my parents go, yeah, we're worried because, you know, I don't know. But I think it's different scale.
Gemma, should we throw open to the floor?
Sorry, I don't half wang on. Sorry, you just asked me.
We've got one question there. We've got the rowing mics. I think you've got to put your hands up higher.
You can say it loudly, I'll repeat it if you want. Do you mind just saying your name at the beginning, sir, so I can publicly humiliate you?
So I'm Danny Vitkovic. I work with the Competition Markets Authority, actually, and I'm an alumni as well. I wanted to ask you the way Musk laid you off compared to...
He didn't lay me off. I resigned.
Okay. So can you tell us a bit more about that and also kind of the reasons of doing it in such a bullish way?
Oh, that he did?
For the rest of the organization. And how do you compare what happened in Twitter compared to the other tech giants also laying off a number of stuff?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So just to be clear, that sounded really defensive, didn't it? Yeah, I resigned. I didn't get laid off. I think I was the first employee outside of the US to resign, I think. And by the way, I didn't do it for emotional reasons. I did it because I was worried about my credibility. And what I mean by that is I could talk, I mentioned when one tweet away from disaster, I knew before what the strategy was. So I could always defend it or develop it or work on it. I just didn't know moving forward, so I was worried about that. But you talk about the way he did it versus others. Okay, so if you ask an investment banker, they'll go, it's totally fine, the way he did it. Twitter had been acquired. It's the second worst deal of all time. Not if you're a stockholder, but if you're Elon Musk, it's the second worst deal of all time. I will say there's a lot of unluckiness in that because it was right before the Ukraine crisis and then when the markets tumbled. And just so you know, like people who deal with him internally, but can be a very charming man, like very, very reasonable in very many ways. But then publicly, that doesn't necessarily display that. And I mentioned this to a friend of mine who is an investment banker. And he said, well, of course he's charming. He said he's the only one of the tech giants who's ever had to raise any capital. So Larry and Sergey at Google, they invented a sausage machine that printed money. Then you got Facebook that developed this incredible targeting tool. Amazon, sold books out of his garage now, And then, but Elon Musk didn't build these tools. He's basically seen a product and spoke work, but he's always raised capital. So it's not unusual in an acquisition that layoffs happen, and in a relatively clandestine, maybe that's the wrong word, but in that kind of way, because they're acquiring a company, they don't know the HR, they might not trust the HR. However, this was probably I can't think of a more public acquisition. So everything's written everywhere. He's a global superstar, or, well-known person, superstar. So it's a bit strange, sorry. But what I will say is it hurt a lot of people because there are ways of doing stuff, right? So if you compare it to, and as I say, there might be reasons for this, but I don't see why they couldn't have been a bit of an overlap. When Google laid off however many people they laid off, Sundar Pichai wrote an email to the whole team, and they said, we've had to make really hard decisions, and this is what we're doing, and this is what blah, blah, and laid it all out. You know what? Everyone's grown up. They get it. It might be sad, but they get it. What Twitter got is an email. Bear in mind, he had never written an email to us. Right? An email from an anonymous, it wasn't a person, it was HR or whatever, saying, tomorrow, if you can't log in tomorrow, you're gone. We're words to that effect, maybe not quite as brutal, but it's kind of like, we've had to make some difficult choices. If you can't log in tomorrow, you haven't got a job, we'll be in touch. And there'd been a lot of speculation anyway. And the one thing I would say is, again, this is between us, but the one thing I observe is what we were very proud of at Twitter was we really developed a culture of valuing people, inclusivity, and this is a culture of fear. And I think that, which is fine if you sign up for that. But there were 7,000 people on October the 23rd. There are 1,800 now. And 50% went in that layoffs, then a few hundred more, and then a lot of people said, I'm gone. And I think that whilst I understand, the BBC did a programme about it, the BBC wrote an article about it, and they did a panorama about it, but they did a load of surveys, and they think the service has become worse, right? That's what they've said. I'm not a judge of it, right? And someone said, oh yeah, but asked me, why do you think that? I went, all right. You know the phrase, less is more? Less is less. That's why it's called less. Right now, the company was bloated. Every company has made layoffs. That's fine. But if you get rid of 5,200 people out of 7,000, guess what? It will be slower. People might not respond as quickly. If you get rid of certain subscriptions of great tools, guess what? The product might not be as good. That's fine, but you can't pretend otherwise. If you use a sporting analogy, if Arsenal get rid of, 60% of their team tonight, they ain't winning the league. So I think whilst I totally understand the decisions, my personal belief, it could be done in a far more classy manner. When I joined, I sound like a dinosaur now, but people used to drop hashtags. Remember hashtags? They were a thing once when they hashtags.
By the way, we didn't plant that question. Don't worry. That was an authentic question.
You can answer it because sure. Hashtag. We had a hashtag keep classy. Just behave in a classy manner, right? And I don't think that's classy.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. What's your name, please?
My name is Dara Nasr. I'm also Iranian.
Ah, fantastic
and
news.
I'm a legal alumni and
Oh, God.
one of the first lawyers. We were a group of first lawyers in Twitter. I'm a big Twitter fan.
Oh.
We had a group called Twiggles.
Oh, right. Yes, I know the Tweagles, yeah. I do. It sounds like I'm being sarcastic.
Is there a
Sorry,
TikTok version of them?
No, they have they're people on Twitter that were the legal people. And then nurses have people, we nurses and so on.
We met, we had meetings, sometimes in a pub. I went to Scotland and I had a tour of Edinburgh by one of the members. So it was absolutely great. Right. So I've been watching the impact of Twitter on free speech. And being Iranian, I've been following the Green Revolution and everything. That Twitter allowed things to come up, allowed people to express themselves and to speak. People were speaking anonymously, although we know that anonymously is not 100%. I was just going to ask you, how much political pressure did you have from countries like Iran?
Genuinely, I don't know. I don't know. Iran, probably not as much as, probably not that. Iran just say they'll turn it off. But it's a fascinating point you touch on, is that actually a lot of the Twitter's growth was because of Arab Spring. I don't know the situation in Saudi. I don't think there's an enormous amount of political pressure. If I'm being totally honest, there's probably more political pressure on the BBC right now, let's put it that way, because that's state-owned, They just threaten. I think it's more like in Turkey, you'd wake up one day and then Erdogan will go, I'm turning this off. So they know there's a revenue constraint. Mm-hmm. We don't monetize Iran, so there's, I don't work there anymore, keep saying we. But my point is, I don't think Iran would be that huge in terms of that. There might be other territories that might say, I remember when I was at Google, we heard a story that they nearly did a deal to have Google search in China or Hong Kong or something like that. But Google would only do it because China would say, yes, but you're not allowed this site and that site and this site and that site. And Google said they would only do it if they could put at the top of the page, this page has been restricted by your country, by your government, right? And I think in Hong Kong that was okay, but I don't think in China. That's the most political influence I've heard, where, what would probably be more pertinent is the amount of political influence, say, in America. That's why Twitter got rid of political advertising. It wouldn't allow political money coming in because it was fueling the misinformation. People were doing the wrong thing. People could pay to misinform. But the free speech thing is a really, really, really dark rabbit hole. And in America, it's this constitutional amendment. In other countries, it's banned. In territories like the UK, it's not, it's kind of, some people really believe in it. Some people just think, just be sensible. I mean, someone just said to me, I remember once, I said, I can't tell you who, because they're quite influential. But I said, what's your view on free speech? And I went, my view is don't be a dick. So it's like there's a bit of that. But no, I don't, it doesn't really answer your question. But genuinely, in the UK, we came under no, pressure. If there was an issue, we would get summoned to discuss to the government to say why. And guess what? Whenever we did, they would say, okay, you're doing more than we thought, but do more, please. Fine, that's totally cool.
Was there one more question then? Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Soda. I'm a reporter at Insider. My question is not related to Elon Musk or Twitter.
Right, but this is off the record, right?
Yeah, this is off the record.
Do you know Lara O'Reilly?
Sorry?
Do you know Lara O'Reilly?
I do, yes.
Send her my regards.
I will.
Yeah.
My question is...
That's on the record. You can send her my regards.
Okay, I will do that. I wanted to ask, what's the best piece of advice you'd give to young people to succeed in their careers?
Always, before you address a room, ask if there are journalists in the room. That is number one. And I'm really stuck on finding anything else because that's no. What would I give somebody to do? Sorry, can you repeat the question?
What's the best piece of advice you'd give to someone to succeed in their career?
In their career, authenticity is a big one. Just be the best version of yourself. Someone said to me, if you go to a room full of people, there's always going to be a dick. If you can't find that person, it's probably you. Right? So try to be quite self-aware. I think that's trying to poetically say. But if you're at somewhere, one thing about succeeding in your career, okay, if you're not happy where you are, you ain't going to succeed. So let's just be totally clear. There's a guy called Sean Aker, who's a behavioural economist at Harvard, I believe, and he did this whole piece of work about, because everyone thinks in order to be happy you need to succeed. What he's actually found is the majority of people who succeed are happy, and so it's the other way around. So people who are negative, that might not be their fault, that just might mean they're not enjoying it. So if you're a young person, you don't like where you are, and you think, but the grass probably ain't greener, it probably is, or it's just not for you. And if you're waking up on Sunday filled with dread about the next day, that ain't great. I remember feeling a bit like that when I was at school, but I knew it was a necessary evil until I got to necessary evil. It was a beautiful joy, but arduous at times. But at work, sometimes, and I know it's hard and it's hard at the beginning, but again, I really live by that. If you're going to do something for 70% of your life, I'd really love to enjoy that.
We've got a question at the back.
Please, yes, sorry for... Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, you need a mic. Thank you, by the way.
Hello. My name is Srikar, and I'm a master's student here. So my question is, what do you say about the chaos or the confusion that your former boss has created in buying the Twitter?
What's that? Sorry?
Confusion that your former boss has created in buying the Twitter.
In what way? What do you mean?
Like, the news has rolled out that he's going to buy it, and then he's not.
Oh, right, yeah. Oh, wow, yeah, that was... So you mean in the period from April to October last year, the up and down, what did I think of that? I thought, like you probably, I thought it was insane. The one thing I would say is you learn, when you work for an American tech company, you often feel that if you're not in the hub, you feel quite removed from it. But there are highs and lows on those things. Yes, you're removed, but you're also removed from the emotion of it as well. And I think it was far more emotional in the US than it was the UK. I think I was quite positive about it. And what I mean by... when he first announced it, I was thinking, oh, look, richest man in the world wants to buy Twitter. We've spent years apologising for not being Facebook and Google. Suddenly we can do stuff. Well, it's quite interesting. Then there's a court case. Okay, then there's a bit up and down. And then it's like, oh, God, what's going to happen? And again, the speculation's wild. So you don't know. It was incredibly turbulent, is what I will say. But I've been at Twitter a long time, and I've been through a lot of turbulence, and ultimately, I just felt like I just wanted to see how it played out, and then I make a decision. But a lot of people, especially in the US, found it really difficult. But you look up to your leaders, right, and what they project. You know, I remember years ago, we had this internal, and this is not a bad mantra, right, but we had this internal thing where every week on a Thursday, when the company was, let's say, sub 500 people, every week on a Thursday, they would get up in San Francisco, live stream to the world, and answer questions, right? And you would go onto this thing internally and put your questions on there. Some could be answered on the thing, like, you know, does anyone know where the toilet is yet for the second floor? You know, but then some best ones were done to the globe. But that form was public, so you could see what people were doing. And someone once wrote, I've noticed for the last 2 months that our user base has plateaued. Should we panic? Right? Fine. And someone wrote back going, and I'm junior, I only do this, and blah, blah, blah. But my father's in the military, and my mother's, you know, a doctor, and all this. And the only advice I can give is, I don't think panic is the right response to anything. Right? And on the Thursday meeting, the head of product said whatever he said, don't panic, it's fine. But my point is, I've kind of felt that I wasn't going to panic, I was going to say, but it was turbulent, and it was a press feeding frenzy. And in my career, my 10 years at Twitter, I've sometimes thought, I wish I worked somewhere that no one cared about. And then a second later, I thought, what am I talking about? People would kill to be in my position. That's why I feel so lucky. So yes, turbulence.
One last question, I think, from the gentleman. Yeah.
Sorry for that. One last question. You said, first you were happy and you were excited when your former boss has told that he's buying the Twitter, and then later on, when he acquired, you resigned because you thought about your credibility.
I resigned. Yes, I resigned because I realised very early on that it was going to be very different. I was finding out, if I had to run an office of however many, I was finding out information at the same time as the Daily Mail. So it's very difficult, A. Secondly, if we had hate speech, I wouldn't know how to take it down anymore. I wouldn't even know whether it would be taken down. And that would affect my credibility. But the first bit was about more team leadership.
One last question. Yes, please go ahead.
Downs, given the obvious question about the Twitter files and the embedment of basically the FBI and CIA and relationship with Twitter and other institutions in America, how's that panned out for you here in the UK with British services?
What do you mean? Have British services contacted me?
Yeah, well, contacted Twitter to basically influence or
no.
Basically stick.
I can say that hand on heart.
Right,
no.
So
it's a massively different beast in America. You know, the political beast in America is absurd. Like, you know, when I was brought up, I was told you don't really discuss your religion or your politics, right? It's become a game in America. You know, advertisers have to tweet about it or why? And by the way, and it's such an ethical thing in America. You know, I had a colleague at Google who said it's all about guns, gays, and God in America. Whereas in the UK, it was always like, if you want to pay less tax, you vote. You know, that was what that's what it was. I mean, whether or not. So I genuinely, in British, no, we weren't. The only things we were ever approached about was nothing as political high scale, was can we give them data around legal cases or like prosecutions and stuff like that. And there are certain times where obviously we always did, and there's certain times where our lawyers just went, well, this it's not a good idea. They're asking for, and that was always a conversation that was going on. But never am I aware of anything like that whatsoever. Hand on heart.
We're going to wrap it up. Dara, thank you so much for all.
I'm sorry I rambled on.
No, we thoroughly.
I suppose that's
enjoyed
what I was
all
here
your
for, wasn't it?
honest, authentic answers. Thank you very much. They were not 140 characters anyway, so.
280 now, but yeah, it's fine.
We're going to hand the podium back to Colin.
you. Let me start by saying you're all pretty safe, because on TikTok I'm not going to do a dance while I'm up here. I know some of you might want me to, but I'm not going to do a dance. Dara, thank you so much, and thank you so much for taking us through your journey. At school, when you were 16th out of 17th, I must say, if I was at the same school, I think I might have been the 17th person. But actually, what was important was basically believing in yourself. And Dara believed in himself. One of the things he did say all the way through to the questions and to the comments is, just be yourself. And just keep on holding on to that. And look at what Dara has achieved. I was really pleased to see that his law degree here at Queen Mary came in use tonight, especially when he was asked the question about what he's going to do next, and it was a perfect answer. The other answer I picked up, and one that I need to learn from, is when you walk into a room, is to ask the question, is there a journalist in the room? But I'm sure that everyone would take, Dara's answers as they were presented. The interesting one I felt was about hate speech and the way that Dara has grappled with that. And the comment that stuck with me was when Dara said, we're just holding up a mirror to society. And I think that that's something that we need to all reflect on. And I think that that was a perfect answer. And of course about the misinformation. But also Dara's answer when we pushed him, and we pushed him a number of times about why he resigned. And he talked about credibility, but it was also what was coming out in Dara's answers was his values that he believed in, which also comes back to be yourself. Dara, we look to see where you're going to go next. I'm sure it's going to be announced, but actually we're very proud that you're a part of the Queen Mary community. We're very grateful that you've come back and shared your story. I know as students that are in the audience, students that are online, and also our alumni are very grateful and very heartened to hear your stories and your success. And we look forward to celebrating your continued success, whatever you may do and whatever role that you may take next. So let me finish by asking you once again to give a round of applause for Dara, but also our chair, Yasmin. Thank you. I need to just remind you that we've got a House of Lords event in April, a reception. And it's a great event to be able to meet fellow alumni. We are going to announce that, and the announcement will go out pretty soon. If you do want to come to the House of Lords, I would urge you to move very quickly and get signed up for it, because it goes very, very fast. Those of you that are here in the room, we are going to move outside. We're going to have a few drinks. I know you want to talk to Dara. Please give him a little bit of space to at least get a drink. And of course, I'm sure he will answer some more questions. If you are a journalist, please highlight that before you ask any more questions. But thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this evening. Those of you that are online, I know that you're joining us from all over the world. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to sometime very soon seeing you on campus. Thank you very much.